Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of The Revenant. And when this movie was first described to me, it was Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy fight a killer bear. And I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. I am in. And then I saw the preview, and I was like, God damn it, it's one of those kinds of movies. Stupid art house films and their great cinematography and their great performances and their agonizingly slow pacing. So I figured that I'd probably see it when it comes to me on Netflix, as I do with most of these kinds of films, but I probably wouldn't pursue it in the theaters. And then I'm looking at the competition, and the only other movie that is coming out this week that I was interested in was The Forest, a horror film. And my immediate thought was, I'm probably going to see The Forest, because at least it's a horror movie, and I think the premise is kind of cool. But I'm still kind of iffy about that, because I figure that if it comes out in January, then The Forest is probably a piece of shit. And I was going to the movies with my dad, and he decided he wanted to see The Revenant more, and here I am. Now, you might be thinking, the fact that I considered seeing The Forest over The Revenant implies that I am a very shallow viewer. But I will remind you that I own the Carnosaur trilogy on DVD, and these are like the greatest art house films of all time. So I'm not. But now that I've seen The Revenant, what did I think? I'm glad I saw this in theaters, because it was pretty spectacular. One of my issues with these kinds of movies is I often feel like there's something very superficial about them. They're obviously trying to get those Oscars, and sometimes it seems like they force so much heavy-handed symbolism, and they slow the pace to a crawl for absolutely no reason, and actors will just be staring into the camera for long periods of time. And it just seems like it's trying to convince the audience that it's a lot more than it really is. I had this feeling with Only God Forgives, which pissed me off, because that film was like the quintessential art house movie, and yet I thought there was nothing challenging about it whatsoever. I mean, all the symbolism was so heavy-handed that it doesn't even really count as symbolism. And so I find these kinds of movies to be obnoxious. But The Revenant is a very positive example. Yeah, it's slow-paced. However, I never got bored. I never grew impatient. Well, I kind of did, but that wasn't so much the movie's fault as much as it was my bladder's fault. I really had to pee, and yet I knew that if I left, something important was going to happen. But I thought every scene within The Revenant really did add something to the overall narrative. I felt that if it was sped up, it would have lost a lot of its dramatic impact. There are some flaws, in my opinion, that haven't really been addressed yet, at least that I've seen, and I'll get into those in a moment, or in a while. But overall, I was thoroughly invested. I thought the characters were interesting. I thought their dynamics and relationships were interesting. I thought the actors had all delivered incredible performances. If I had to choose the best, I'd actually say Tom Hardy as the villain, because for one, I could not understand a single thing he said, but it all sounded amazing. But I liked that he really created a real character here. I liked all his quirks. I liked his manic, crazy eyes. I liked the fact, though, that he was portrayed as a human being who was just reacting very badly towards this situation, and that's what made him the villain. Through other circumstances, he may have come across as reasonable and somewhat heroic. But you still really don't like him because of what he does in this movie, but you find him to be compelling. Every time he's on screen, you are drawn to him, even if you can't really understand him. Leonardo DiCaprio does excellent as well, but one problem I think with Leo, and I wonder if Titanic has something to do with this, is that I can never see him as anyone but Leonardo DiCaprio. I see him as a personality more than as an actor. That's not a bad thing either, as long as you can make that connection to the audience. But when I looked at Tom Hardy's character, I did not necessarily see Tom Hardy. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Tom Hardy does an excellent job at putting himself in these roles where it's almost like the actor kind of vanishes and you only see the character. With Leonardo DiCaprio, he just can never quite shake the image of Leonardo DiCaprio. And I just kind of wonder, maybe it's because he was forced upon us as the guy from Titanic. And, you know, he was the teenage heartthrob. But at the same time, I'd like to think that we've gotten away from that because Leonardo DiCaprio has proven himself since then. And I do think that he's great when it comes to showing emotion. I always do like him, but I'd still say Tom Hardy stole the show for me. Even though, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio definitely carries this movie very well. His very physical performance, you know, he emotes perfectly, and just like Hardy, he's very compelling to watch. Certain things I'd heard about really did not interest me and just kind of added to my concerns. Like, for example, they said that the film is mostly shot using natural lighting. Well, to me, that's a vanity thing. What difference is that going to make? At least with the director's previous work, Birdman, which had one of those gimmicks where there's very few takes or cuts. So a scene will go on for a real long amount of time without a break. At least you can kind of appreciate that in terms of how how the scenes flow. But with natural lighting, I just thought that was a total ego trip right there. But it actually looked really good. The film had a very distinct visual style that I don't believe I've ever really seen before, and I do believe the lighting played a major role in that. The scenery is already very beautiful to behold, and the cinematography is brilliant. I would say that The Revenant boasts some of the best imagery that I've ever seen in a movie. There are some just haunting shots that will stay with me for such a long time. I loved for example, there's this one part where Leonardo DiCaprio is kind of floating in a river, and it's just this big wide shot, and it's like, oh wow, that is awesome. And then there's this other one that I'd actually argue is more interesting, even though it's not quite as notable, but it's just Leonardo DiCaprio is walking through snow, and it's just another big wide shot. But however, the way the camera is kind of moving forward, it almost looks like the snow is a body of water, and that it's rippling. So it's like, what? First, you're thinking, is he walking on water? And then like, oh, okay, it's just snow. But the way the camera was moving kind of created that illusion. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that just goes to show how compelling this imagery is, because it's making me think about it. And there's a lot of symbolism. However, it's the type of symbolism that challenges the viewer. It's not something that's always going to be obvious. You have to really pay attention. You have to think about it. Unlike shit such as Only God Forgives, which is just too obvious. This is symbolism done right, in my opinion. And the action scenes are visceral and brutal and insanely well choreographed, but at the same time, it doesn't really look like it was choreographed. The violence is hardcore, and it's often very uncomfortable. And one thing I really liked about the direction of these scenes is that the action scenes almost like they bring the audience into this battle. I felt like the camera work was often engaging the viewer in such a way that something would sometimes kind of fly. Sometimes it's just a little bit of debris, or sometimes it'll be a weapon, sort of towards the camera, and it'll instinctively make you flinch. And they were always using these empowering angles, so when somebody was being attacked, you'd almost feel like you were right there, and they were either coming towards you or they were close nearby. And once again, you'd cringe, and that I thought was really cool. The violence is going to turn a lot of people off, but I thought it really did fit this tone. The bear attack was the bear attack was easily the best bear attack I've ever seen in a movie. At no point did I see a special effect. I felt like Leonardo DiCaprio was getting his ass mauled by a bear. Just certain little things too, like at one point the bear has Leo on his stomach and he's just clawing at his back, and you're not seeing the damage, but Leo's screams just really stand out and makes that scene seem so much more brutal. And it already is really brutal. There's at one point where you see a big chunk get taken out of his shoulder, and however they pulled that off, man, that was amazing. And that, I feel like, is really all I have to say. I thought this film was great. Uh, Watch it. It definitely deserves your viewing attention. Not everybody is going to like it, but it's an important movie that I thought was just a very well made film, and everything the director was going for worked for me. Now, there are a few flaws I did notice. The first one is very subjective, but I did not like the ending. To me, it just seemed like instead of having a resolution, it just stopped. I've already discussed this with some people, and they've disagreed with me. They thought it was a perfectly fitting ending, so that's only my opinion. You might not agree with me. But I can't really see how else they could have ended it either without adding like another 30 minutes to the running time. And that probably would have been a bit too long. So that's just, once again, my own personal criticism. Two areas that did annoy me, though, on a technical level. The first is small, the second one's a little larger. The smaller one is I did sometimes feel like there was too much breathing on the camera, and all that did was draw attention to the camera and remind me that, yes, I am watching a movie. I know every movie I see, I am only watching a movie. But it just, it leaned on the fourth wall way too much, and that, once again, is also kind of a personal thing, but it did it more than once, so I kind of feel like they did take that too far. The other problem, and I haven't heard this yet either, but I have to imagine other people have to have noticed, was sometimes the lip syncing was really bad. Especially when Leo would encounter a Native American and they would speak in their language. Sometimes I was like, what the fuck? Their words aren't matching their mouths. So that was very strange, but maybe there was an artistic reason for that. I always heard, like in Shutter Island, the continuity errors with the water, that was intentional. I don't know if I completely believe that, but I haven't heard of any justification for the awkward lip syncing, but that was something I did often notice, and it did sometimes take me out of the movie. But overall, these are just minor flaws in a great movie. So you should watch it. It's really almost as good as Carnosaur 3. Not quite as convincing with the special effects, but fuck, I'm having difficulty saying that with a straight face. So that is all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. I did not do a written review of it, but I have released my list of my favorite movies of 2015 and my least favorite movies of 2015. So please read those, and I shall see you guys later.